Okay, so there was a false start, and I didn't know if went live or not, and I think I should be live now. Christ knows. I'm just going to be sitting around making some content while I have all the time in the world, and I don't know because I live on the other side of the road from probably many people who would view my content or view my channel, so I don't know when a good time to post is. I'm presuming um, like now. I'll try now. I'll start now, and today is like this is 2 o'clock on a on an afternoon on a Tuesday. No, it's Monday afternoon. It's like one of these. Currently, it's Anzac Day in this country, so that's sort of like the equivalent of, I think, Veterans Day if you're American, or where we celebrate our war dead. So it's a day off, and so I thought I'd talk about New Zealand politics. And New Zealand politics could be quite interesting if you don't know anything about New Zealand. It can also be very dull if you live here, because there are the politics around the rest of the world is generally a lot more interesting. Um, and Sorry, I just had to take a paracetamol. Oh my god, I'm a bit hungover, I must admit. So we have this show, and the current leader of our centre-right party, the National Party, um, going the rounds on Twitter is links to uh, this interview, and it's quite. I haven't watched. I've watched and shared captures of it, little snippets of it, but I've decided I'd do a sort of a live kind of reaction to it. It's apparently Christopher Luxon, who's the leader of the opposition, gets completely annihilated in this interview. So I'm quite looking forward to this. The interviewer here, the guy who you'll see here, his name's called Jack Tame. He's obviously devastatingly attractive. Aside from that, he's quite a on balance, I think he's quite a good journalist. I think I have seen the left say naughty things about him in the past, and I think it's probably because he can take that devil's advocate position, which obviously is a very MSM kind of mainstream media sort of thing he does. But anyway, without further ado, let's see where we go with this guy. You'll learn a bit. I think you'll learn a bit about how our centre right operates by watching this. And I'm going to, I guess, interject. So
6.9%. If you've bought groceries, filled up your car, or tried to run a business anytime recently, you didn't need to wait for Thursday's Consumer Price Index to appreciate the scale of inflation in New Zealand, a 30-year high.
You want to have sex with them, don't you? You also, if you're watching this, you want to have sex with them, don't you? Don't deny it.
So what to do? National Party leader Christopher Luxon says the government bears responsibility for some of the inflation and responsibility for fixing it. This is our first interview for 2022. Kia ora, good morning.
Kia ora, Jack, good to be with you.
Your job is to oppose and to propose, to critique, but also to offer up some solutions. For months now, your party has blamed the government for the inflation, or at least some of the inflation that we're experiencing right now. This is what you said after the CPI figures were released on Thursday.
The reality is the government has had a massive increase in government spending since it came to power. The spending is up over 68% since this government came to power. Some of it was necessary, absolutely, with respect to COVID, but there is an assumption that every dollar spent is really wisely spent, and that's not the case. There is good and there is bad spending, and there is wasteful spending.
This is just kind of, it's a real broken record, isn't it? Because this whole notion of just attacking government spending, it's a very centre-right thing to do. But it seems to be all they say. Like, there doesn't seem to be any, it's like you never get really much in the way of vision, do you, from these people? You always get this kind of, the government's overspending. I mean, they never really, it's such a mantra that that becomes, yeah, I don't. And I guess if you're that way inclined, you'll support them. But I just don't think there's anything to buy into there. So that's probably why I'm not, for many reasons, I'm not. I don't really conform to that style of politics. And I feel that uh, maybe if he had something a bit more in there for me, I would, because as far as I'm concerned, the government does a decent job, and has problems, but I mean, spending isn't the problem. So he'll never get me as a voter. So I'll be interested to see how well he does for the rest of the country.
So specifically, what government spending has driven inflation?
Well, look, I think the first thing, Jack, I'd say is most Kiwis are incredibly concerned about inflation.
Okay, did you notice how he just stuttered there? He was just like, the first thing. The thing about this guy is that he's only been a politician for just over a year, 1 year. Before that, he was the CEO of Air New Zealand, and he talks about this a lot. I used to be the chief executive of Air New Zealand. That's because we recognise that as our national carrier. We don't talk about that he spent 30 years working for, I think, Unilever. So he's very much a corporate. He's a company man kind of person. When you say Air New Zealand, that's a recognisable brand, and we think, oh, this is like a visionary capitalist, like someone like Steve Jobs, you might think. You know what I mean? Like someone who getting back to what I said about vision, someone who has a very clear idea on what drives a country forward or something. But actually, he's kind of a functionary, and also he's not skilled in politics. And I think this is what's going to happen in this interview. From what I've seen of this interview, is he flails, because if he stays, if you move away from the line he's been given by his subordinates, the scripted line, he's just completely lost. He's just completely adrift. He doesn't have that critical engagement that politicians learn. And it's one thing to have a CEO as because people love that idea of having a CEO running a country. I'm going to run this country like a business. But being a politician and running a corporation are very different competencies. And as we're about to see, I guess, you're about to see where there's this big gulf, and people expecting him to be this kind of cool cucumber, this guy who's on top of his brief, can sell you a water to no, what is it, sand to the Arabs, that's probably quite racist, I don't know, but you know what I'm saying, it's kind of, but you don't get that at all from this guy. He just flubs, and you can see there that he's stuttering already. So he hasn't had this. He's not quite a silver-tongued politician. That could be a good thing, because it means quite transparently dishonest.
Getting a grip on the economy, because it means that their living standards are really impacted. When the prices are going up, everyone can see that. When Kiwis can see their wages aren't keeping up, they know they're going backwards, they know they're worse off. And when inflation gets its grip into an economy, it's a really serious thing. And the sooner you deal with it, the better. So what we're saying to the government is, look, you can blame it on international factors as much as you like, and yes, there is a component of that, but our trading partners are in fact performing much better and have much lower levels of inflation than New Zealand. So let's control the bit that we can control, which is domestic inflation. And within that, I think there's 5 things the government should be doing that they're not doing at the moment that they could be doing to take control of it.
Well, let's not talk about the future plan.
He's like, there's 5 things, and it's like he's been given this list. He's been given a memo this morning where he says, okay, what are the 5 things I need to be able to present? He said that to some staffer. It's so funny, because you can almost sort of, it's so predictably, if you go to other countries' politics, like the United Kingdom or the United States, they put on more of a show. The United Kingdom, they're more or less on top of their briefs, give or take, and you don't get this kind of, okay, I've got my homework kind of, this is what this guy's doing.
It's just yet, although we will get to that. Let's talk about government spending that has led to the inflation we're experiencing right now. 6.9%, a record figure. Specifically, what government spending that your party opposed has led to that inflation? Well,
look, I think the reality is this: the government is spending $128 billion in government spending. It is up over $52 billion from 2017. So a massive increase in government spending.
So what have you opposed?
So this government has spent in the last fiscal year something, whatever the figure was, 150 billion. It's spent a lot in COVID relief, and it's a typical, it's a social democratic party. It's going to obviously increase a lot of services. I think last month they increased the unemployment benefit, I think, by 30%. Something. No. By more, even more. I think 50%. Quite a lot. And it would stand to reason that government spending is more than it's ever been. I mean, that's not really. I mean, that's a bad. That in itself isn't a bad thing, and I don't think he can. He's working from the presumption that 50%, $50 billion more than 50 years ago, than 5 years ago, is inherently a bad thing. But it's just a thing, you know.
I would say to you is that the role is to go through all of that existing $100 billion plus of spending line by line and identify the wasteful spending that's going on.
You and your party.
And you see this thing, this is another line he's concocted this morning, one of the staffers, where they say, line by line. He imagines that there's just this list of government projects and he just has to go through and go and just cross all of them out and save $50 billion, when actually what he's really saying, what that really implies, is that he would create another layer of bureaucracy, because what the government would have to shut down until approval can be got on each of these projects. And you can't arbitrarily decide that a government project is worthless from your desk on the 9th floor. You need to have people who can tell you that this is feasible, this isn't feasible, this will work, this won't work, this project is dead in the water, this project has promise. That's a new bureaucracy he's asking for. It's not like just this one person could just diminish them up, and no one really goes into this, because a question I would ask of him, maybe Jack might ask this, would be, what does that look like going line by line? What does that actually look like to you? But then you probably just get this, it's probably not a good question, because you get that typical prevarication of,
We have said that government spending to this point has caused inflation. I'm asking you for specific examples.
So let me give you some examples.
Great.
So $100 million on a slow train from Hamilton.
Okay, let's break that down.
Higher emissions, that actually has longer journey times. Not good.
Okay, so $100 million. You just said $128 billion
Correct.
is Crown core expenditure for the year. So $100 million represents 0.07% of government.
Let me give you some more.
Good.
$1.8 billion on.
when he says, let me give you some more, it's because he's been stung before, because he's been asked this question.
14,000 more bureaucrats, and yet we haven't got better health, education, transport, infrastructure, poverty outcomes with that investment.
And that's also a stupid thing, because he said 14,000 more bureaucrats. That's not true. He's saying, like, bureaucrats, when you hear the word bureaucrat, you think useless pen pusher. That's what you think, right? But what there's 14,000 more of is public servants. Public servants and bureaucrats is not the same thing. You don't call a nurse a bureaucrat, would you? But he wants to think. He wants, I guess, the New Zealand public to think that there's a bunch of people dressed in suits drinking their fancy coffees in Wellington, just buying swimming pools or something. I don't know.
$1.8 billion. Okay, so still...
Let me give you some more.
Less than 1%. Yeah.
Yep. $1.9 billion on mental health, and yet the Mental Health Foundation
over how many years?
Says we haven't actually improvement there. If you just think about what the
$1.9 billion over how many years?
Over the term of this government.
Over 5 years.
Yep. Over the term.
That was the commitment. So that's 400.
Holy shit! This is what I like. I like this bit because this is what I saw online. Because Jack came correct here, because he knew that it was the figure was a 5-year figure. And just look at this guy's expression. He's getting flustered. He just looks like he's not. Yeah, and he looks dishonest because that figure he was given probably wasn't one he realised was probably for 5 years. He just said over the term, very vaguely over the term, and he's just been told actually it's not a 1 year figure, it's a 5 year figure. Oh my God, he's getting completely nailed.
$100 million a year.
Sure.
Okay, so
let me
400
keep
million.
going.
No, 400. So that's 0.35%.
Yep, $500 million on a brand new health restructure at a time of a pandemic when our health system is incredibly stressed.
$500 million, less than 0.5%.
Yep, that's going to add tremendous amount of middle management, but not a lot of frontline services.
Not all of that money's been committed, and that's less than 0.5%.
And what is about to be committed is up to anywhere from $10 to
Not talking about
$29
the
billion
future,
of
talking
light
about
rail.
to this point. What I want to know specific examples, really big spending, massive spend. No, you haven't. You've given me examples that amount to less than 2% of government.
But what I'd say to you, Jack, is what's missing is a discipline of financial discipline, right? We're missing that in this government.
So I've heard this before by these people, by these politicians. What's missing is financial discipline. Again, this is just the drumbeat of not just a government who doesn't handle finances. There's no actual evidence for this. He's just pulling these like real outlier examples, which, as Jack's already just nailing him on, only make up less than 1% of the fiscus, the whole government expenditure. If all you're identifying is just less than 1%, what's actually going on here? It means that he's not being clear about what he wants to cut, or he just doesn't. Or he's just an empty suit, right? So which will it be? Dishonesty or stupidity?
Say is missing are specific examples. I mean, this has been the backbone of your attack line for the last few months. I've got a whole page of examples here where you...
Look at this. He actually looks so nervous. Like, he actually... Forget the substance of what he's saying. His body language...
Missing that in this government.
What I'd say is missing are specific examples. I mean, this has been the backbone of your attack line for the last few months. I've got a whole page of examples here where you say that government spending...
He's like, I can give you lots of examples.
has led to inflation. I'm sitting here asking for examples. You're giving me infinitesimal little amounts of government spending.
Man, he's going hard. This is Jack Tame. He's going hard. He's just going absolutely hard. He's going, you're giving me little infinitesimal.
We spent $5 billion on education, and we've got worse outcomes for that money. We only have 60% of our kids going to regular school.
So do you oppose $5 billion for education?
No, I don't. I'm not saying we need to spend the money, but you need to get outcomes.
You do need...
He said, he's decided I'm going to pull out a bigger figure out of my ass here. I'm going to say, we spent $5 billion on education. So this guy rightly followed up with, so you want to cut education then?
To spend the money
and get delivery for it. And if you were to go through all of the $100 billion worth of money that the government already spends, I can tell you what Grant Robertson needs to be doing, what Bill English would have been doing, what Nicola Willis will be doing, is telling every minister to go through their budget line by line. There is dumb stuff, there is wasteful spending going on. There are things that are working exceptionally well. We should continue to fund and actually strengthen the funding there.
I would ask him, well, what in your view works exceptionally well? And see what he says.
Things that aren't working well.
So here's the thing. I'm asking you for that wasteful spending. I'm asking you for examples of government spending that your party has opposed that has led...
I don't know if it's just a poor makeup job, but he looks like a gammon, doesn't he? He looks like, I don't know, maybe it's just I'm being racist or something, but like compared to Jack Tame, who's also a Pākehā, he isn't nearly as gammony. Maybe it's something, maybe it's an older guy thing, I don't know, but man, you don't want to look red-faced on TV, eh?
Lead to inflation, and at the moment, despite hammering this attack line for months,
I disagree with you.
You can't give me examples that amount to more than 1 or 2% of government spending.
But you're telling me that $100 million wouldn't make a difference to our healthcare system instead of spending on a train that's not working.
What I'm saying,
you're telling me that $1.9 billion on mental health that has.
You got to love New Zealand politics, where they on a national level they're talking about trains not working, one train not working.
Delivered a single outcome is okay.
Okay, so what, okay, as a percentage of government spending, what is $100 million for a train to Hamilton?
Well, it's a small. I get it. It's
0.07%. No, I mean you're the economy guy.
Yeah.
You are the guy who has your business background.
I love his ability. I guess part of being a good like mainstream television journalists is to feign sort of good faith, I guess. I mean, I think it's good faith. He is talking in good faith, because I have seen him talk to other politicians from different other parts of the political spectrum. But just to be able to say, you're the economics guy. It's like quite sarcastic. He's basically saying you're the numbers guy. Why are you talking shit, doing stupid shit here?
Allows you to understand the stuff better than anyone else. But here you are, and you can't give me specific examples of government spending that has led to 6.9% inflation.
But Jack, what I'm saying to you is this is a government that believes if we announce money, if we spend money, they actually don't focus on outcomes and delivery. And all I'm saying to you is there's a discipline where we don't have targets on that government spending anymore. We don't actually seem to have any financial discipline. A dollar is a dollar. There is good and bad spending within all of that. And each minister needs to be all over their detail of their budgets.
I'm sure
I've given you some examples. I appreciate you don't think $100 million matters, but it does matter because it actually speaks to a culture that we actually don't manage money.
I just noticed, if you're watching this, that the actual caption. This is for the. I'm streaming this directly off the Television New Zealand website, and it says just below this clip, it says, National Leader Christopher Luxon says the government spending is to blame for this week's jump in inflation, but is still struggling to say exactly what. That's a real damning line. If that was me, I mean, if I was a National Party supporter, I'd be like, what the fuck? Because this is like attacking him just here. And the thing is, this is Television New Zealand, which is it's a state TV, it's state television, but it's I wouldn't call them pro-government. Like, I wouldn't call them. In fact, ironically, our individual, our independent television channel, Channel 3, is a bit more left-leaning, I would have said, than TVNZ. So it sort of shows that there's, what I think it indicates to me is that there's blood in the water, and his honeymoon is a very short honeymoon, and there's still a year to go, more than a year to go until the next election, and I don't think it's going to be smooth sailing for him.
Money well.
It's not about what I think matters. It's what $100 million represents as a percentage of Crown spending. When you say the government and their reckless spending have led to inflation, $100 million is 0.07%. It is a drop in the ocean. Let's move on. Let's move on.
All I'd say to you is small actions make a big difference.
Well,
when you've got a culture.
Just look at this. I mean, maybe it's not his fault. Maybe that's how he just looks, because I haven't seen him talk much. But he doesn't look like very, very cool. He looks just kind of a bit flustered, you know?
Where you're happy to let a $100 million slide, you're happy to say a $800 million walking and cycling path is a brilliant idea, and it's not.
How much did they spend on the cycling path?
$51 million
which is
over
what?
4 months.
As a percent, yeah, okay, so that's 0.05% of government spending.
Behind that is, why did the government think that was a stellar idea? Why do they think they would spend $800 million of taxpayers' money?
Yours is the party that says irresponsible spending has caused inflation. So high income, medium income, low income New Zealanders, who is being most squeezed by the cost of living at the moment?
Well, I think all New Zealanders are certainly being squeezed. Obviously, lower middle income earners. I would put it to you that the squeezed middle, as I would say, someone on 55.
Oh shit! Did I just do that?
6 point.
Oh god, we have to go through this again.
Move on. Let's move on.
Well, let's say to you is small actions make a big difference. Well, when you've got a culture where you're happy to let $100 million, obviously lower middle income earners, I would put it to you that the squeezed middle, as I would say, someone on $55,000 to $80,000, they are the median sort of incomes in New Zealand.
Okay, he's right. He's actually factually incorrect here, because the median income in New Zealand is 40,000 New Zealand dollars. It was quite a shock to me, because I would be what he was consider the squeezed middle. I'm going to just say straight up what I made a year up until this last week was, I think last year I made nearly $80,000. So I'm actually earned double. I'm actually quite a high earner compared to what the actual median income. I'm what he's referring to. He thinks I'm squeezed middle, and I kind of am. I'm definitely feeling the pinch. I think everyone is. But he doesn't. But what he doesn't realise is that there's so many other people out there who are even in such much more dire straits. The fact that I'm earning twice the median income, it just blows my mind. Just absolutely blows my mind, because I'm not in a good situation. I'm not in a fantastic situation in my own living, in my own life. But just to know that, wow, I'm earning double what the median income is in this country, just blows my mind.
They're doing it incredibly tough. They're not rich sitting in this country. They're not getting government assistance or help. It's the young couple that came up to me at the markets the other day. They're building their first home in Pocono.
This guy, man. He said this word. You just heard this. I'm gonna have to rewind it.
They are, average, I would say, someone on $55,000 to $80,000. They are the median sort of incomes in New Zealand. They're doing it incredibly tough. They're not rich sitting in this country. They're not getting government assistance or help. It's the young couple that came up to me at the markets the other day. They're building their first home in Pocono.
So he said this word Pocono. He actually means Pokino. It's actually really cringe, and I mean, it's to be expected, I guess. He's a white right winger, but oh man, you get a lot more respect if you actually knew the fucking language of this country. Like, ugh.
They are, average income earners. They've got good jobs, but their bill had just gone up 20%. They've got the rising costs of everything else, and now they're sitting there redesigning that first home as they try and get it back within their budget.
Okay.
So it's the squeezed middle that's doing it really tough.
Well, let's talk about the squeezed middle. If you are Prime Minister and your tax cuts get passed as some sort of a solution to inflation, how much more money would someone on a median income, an average income in New Zealand, be getting every week?
What they'd be getting is about $1,600 for an average household income over a year.
So a single worker would get about $15 a week, $800 a year, right?
Correct. $850 for an average income.
Yeah. So if you were Prime Minister, how much more money would you get a year?
Well, let me tell you what we're thinking about with respect to tax, because I think it's been mixed. The drinks have been mixed.
He's flustering, isn't he? I just looked at the comments. I was waiting for the comments to come in, and I didn't realise people were actually here. So hi everyone. This thing. He said he looks like Lex Luthor. Well, actually, the thing about the right wingers in this country is that they actually do have that look. They have this kind of, it's sort of a if you're balding, you shave all your hair. If you're a balding white guy, you'll shave all of your hair off, and you'll and look like a thumb. and that's a style in this country. There are actually, like, I think four other, I'm not shitting you, there are 4 other politicians on his front bench or in his caucus who all have that polished head, and I think, like, and obviously they all hate well. You can't tell any of them apart. All 4 are the same guy. Well, that's true, Jamie J. They're pretty much just like, who's the next? For as far as I'm concerned, he's just this, like, a white guy in the suit. He can't pronounce te reo Māori. He's just going to say castle spending. There's nothing in here that I can look at and think, oh, there's someone who I would vote for or not vote for. Like, he's just a guy. He's just an empty suit. It's really, but like, I just wish there was something. Normally the media would see an empty suit and kind of, oh God, what have we got to work with here? And in this case, I think the reporter here is just like, he's just decided, oh, well, fuck it, I'm just going to annihilate him. It's my weekend.
The first thing I'd say to you is what we were proposing, in the spirit of, well, it's going to oppose the government, going to propose an idea, is that over the term of this government, inflation's up 12%. Grant Robertson's collected an extra $12.5 billion worth of income tax as a consequence of that.
Do you know what? 12.5, he says that inflation's up, and as a consequence, the government has collected more tax. $12.5 billion more tax. In my mind, I'm thinking, that's a good thing, isn't it? That the government's collecting more revenue in order to fund public services. the kind of thing that he said was a waste earlier. Like, I don't see necessarily the problem. I mean, maybe I'm not an economist, so I don't. But this is, I guess, in his world.
All we were saying was, hey, listen, why don't we take the tax thresholds up by that 11 or 12%?
That's not all you were saying, though, is it?
No, but listen, that's a short-term solution. Say, in this budget in May, you could go off and do that. And actually, that would be a really good thing to give Kiwis back some money. I appreciate it doesn't solve all the challenges that they've got, but it's a start to say, we're going to give you the money in your pocket, not take it back.
Let's not forget you're also scrapping the top tax bracket. So I'm going to go back to that question. Yep. You said $15 a week for someone on the median income in New Zealand.
$850 a year.
Yeah. And if you're Prime Minister, how much more would you get a year?
Well, what I'm saying to you is...
No.
He's asking how much are you going to save from your how much are you going to get back from the tax cuts? Because he's offering people like I'm on the next second to top tax bracket, I guess, and I think I'd get something like $18 a month. I'd get not a lot, you know.
Well, my question, I want you to understand what we're actually proposing.
I understand what you're proposing.
Inflation-adjusted tax thresholds.
And scrapping the top tax, the top
I'll come to
tax
that in a
threshold.
minute.
No. I've asked you a question. Please answer it. How much more would you get per year if you're Prime Minister?
I would do very well because I'm a high income earner. I don't know, but I'm above $180,000.
So
he's basically like, money doesn't matter to me. I'm a high income. I mean, this is why he's not a good politician. Like, why he needs to be. Why a politician who had more experience wouldn't make the mistakes that he's making, because what he's just said there is, money doesn't matter to me. I'm rich. I'm gonna make thousands from these tax cuts, and well, one day you might be like me. Do you know? That's kind of what I'm getting from him.
Why does someone who earns almost $500,000 a year as Prime Minister need a tax cut of $18,000 a year?
What we're talking about here is saying we haven't...
Funny thing as well, I think our Prime Ministers in this country are relatively better paid than the leaders of other, even like developed industrialized countries. I think even probably the Prime Minister of New Zealand might even earn more than the American President. I don't know, but I guess, you know, it's just a public service salary. And I'm sure American presidents are always millionaires before they enter office anyway. But
inflation in our economy. That is the number one problem that we have to deal with in New Zealand. It is having a big impact. It's going to just, you know, it's a really big problem when it gets into it. We're saying very simply, why don't we just lift the taxation thresholds today so that everyone doesn't get caught in tax brackets? That's the plan for the short term. What we've also signalled is that when we get to government in our first term, we're going to unwind the tax increases that the government has passed through. There's been a number of them, Bright Line and, you know, interest deductibility. There's others coming, national insurance.
Tax threshold.
See, this is what boring politics. This is what stable, boring politics sounds like. This is all just like quibbling about tax brackets and stuff. Like it's good. It's good. Like it's good that we're having this conversation here in this country. But my mind is switching off. I want them to start talking about transgender women in bathrooms or something. No, I don't. But you know what I'm saying.
Awards, all that stuff.
So I'm going to.
Thirdly, what I'd say, Jack, is we will go to the election with a fully costed fiscal and tax plan, and that's a more comprehensive.
So are you not planning to scrap the top tax?
Yes, what I'm foreshadowing to you is that that's a piece of it. But what we're saying is those where the government has added tax and costs, those are things that we haven't supported as they've been implemented.
So to be clear, under your tax plan, someone on the median wage in New Zealand would get about $850 more a year. You as Prime Minister would get $18,000 more a year. Now, I'm going to throw a quote to you. The cost of living does disproportionately impact lower income people. That was from you. You oppose...
That's true. That's sort of a truism, isn't it? Cost of living disproportionately affects poor people. That's a pretty factual statement, right?
The winter energy payment.
Oh, fuck, here he goes. Yeah.
Does disproportionately impact lower income people. That was from you. You oppose the winter energy payment. You oppose the minimum wage hike. You oppose the increase to benefits, which were all measures targeted at lower and middle income New Zealanders.
I'm glad this was asked of him because you can't just rabbit on about how New Zealanders are feeling the negative impact of inflation and the cost of living when this government, and I'm not like a big I'm not going to wave the flag for this government, but I mean, this government has increased the minimum wage. It has increased benefits. It's done a lot to increase people's incomes, and he's opposed all of that. So what actually is he giving other than just tax cuts? It's quite embarrassing. I'd feel embarrassed. I mean, if these people had any shame, they should too.
But you support giving $18,000 more every year to someone on almost $500,000.
Jack, in a time of high inflation, why wouldn't you adjust your same tax system, make no more changes to it, just lift it today? I'm asking for a short-term thing that we can do to deal with inflation,
no,
right?
You're talking about the tax brackets. I'm talking about the top tax bracket that you're scrapping.
Yep. So the 39%
right.
is pretty simple, which is we opposed it as it came through and the government implemented it in this parliament. And our view is very simple. We want Kiwis to be able to return to New Zealand who've got lots of skills to offer. We want migrants to be attracted here.
Let me ask this. Do you need $18,000 more a year?
I personally don't. No,
okay, great.
No, I personally don't.
So what's
But
the
I'm
point?
telling you, when we get to the election...
He asked him, didn't he? He said how much... He put it. He returned back to what he was saying before. He waited for him to talk. Okay, I'm going to let him say his waffle about tax, and I'm going to go and return and say, so how much? Just clarify. $18,000 you'll get in tax cuts. Do you need that? And he just said, well, no, not really. This is embarrassing. Like, how there must be, if I was in his party, I'd be kind of like, well, I'd be. I mean, the thing about the reason that they've got him there as the leader is because that's all they have. That's all they have at the moment, because they've gone through, like, I think he's the 5th leader that they've had in 5 years. And there's all sorts of people have deserted the part, all the kind of talent, the kind of the people who would normally have worked quite high up in a cabinet. They've all gone off into the private sector, and the talent pool within the caucus, because there was a huge Labour landslide. Their talent pool within the caucus, within the actual elected parliamentary party, is so shallow. Like, there are all these mouth breathers on safe seats. They're all these kind of like real. I mean, dipshits doesn't begin to describe it. And so this guy comes in his first year as an MP, and that's all he had. These all they have really. Without, if he was to get, if something happened to him, like if there was a scandal or I mean, people are flocking back to him. Like the polls are equalising a lot more now, simply because he looks like what you would imagine a National Party leader would look. He fits the casting profile, the central casting profile, and so that's enough for all the traditional voters to return to his party. But if something happened to him, they have nothing. They have nothing. Like, this party will just die. So it's the kind of pressure on him is, maybe he doesn't feel it, or maybe he does, but oof.
You'll see a fully costed tax and fiscal
Do you
plan.
think most New Zealanders,
given
the cost of living at the moment, most New Zealanders who are fortunate to earn $500,000 a year need $18,000 more every year at the moment?
What I can tell you is our plan, what we've said to you is we're going to foreshadow that we're going to remove taxes the government's passed.
Well, funny you should say that, Jamie J. Another interesting thing about this gentleman is that he is an evangelical Christian. And he's been asked about it, and he won't be asked much more about it, to be honest. But in this country, we have quite a... I think in the last census, there were more people who said they had no religion than people who said they had a religion. So we're probably one of the most secular countries in the world, and we have a very sort of like we've had such probably one of the most diverse faith, the widest range of faiths in office too. So if you go back from our leaders, our current leader, she is a former Mormon, a lapsed Mormon, and then before her, there was a Roman Catholic. Before him, there was he wasn't religious, but he was, I guess he had Jewish heritage. There's a bit of anti-Semitism, tiny little bit of anti-Semitism on level against him, only but what really wasn't like none of the faith of our leaders never really plays a role, because it's one of the things that turns voters off is if you talk about religion in public. You don't. It's one thing we don't do in this country is just talk about religion, in that way. It's actually really distasteful to do. And so he was asked about when he was first made leader. He was asked, "Oh, you're a evangelical Christian." He's a member of one of these like mega churches, I think, one of these really sort of sketchy, probably quite American kind of thing. Oh yeah, well that was Silverfish. The one before him, yeah, the leader before him did this really stupid photo op in a church where she during the election where she pretended to play, to pray, and she was doing this really hammy, like people don't sit in church like this on the pews. Like no one does that, but maybe she'd seen it in a book or something. It was really cheesy, and but yeah. So this guy, he was asked about his faith and specifically his views on abortion, and his answer was quite interesting. He said that, well, I take the normal Christian view that abortion is tantamount. The actual quote is abortion is tantamount to murder. So that's quite would set off quite alarm bells in a lot of people's minds. But then he tried to have it the other way as well, and said, well, thankfully this was all settled in the last parliamentary term, and that debate's moved on, because in the last parliamentary term, our Prime Minister, she championed. There was this. We reformed our abortion law basically in the last parliamentary term, and there's no in this country there are no term limits for abortion, or effectively none, and it's all between a doctor and the patient basically. It's a health it's a concern for health professionals, not for politicians now. It's taken out of their hands, and so that's quite a relief for both sides, I think, because if you're someone like him, it means that he doesn't have to answer these questions, does he? Because it's been taken, the subject of abortion has been taken outside of the political realm. But then we've had several social legislations without the whip, where they've had a free vote, a conscience vote, and one of them has been that we've banned conversion therapy. So you're not allowed to try to change someone's sexual orientation or gender, and this or gender expression, and this person, or what's it called, gender identity. Yeah, sorry. And then the other piece of legislation was safe zones around abortion clinics that carry out abortions, and what that means is that there was a law they passed so that no one could protest outside. And by protest, it means harassing people going in to receive medical care. So they decided that they needed to go a bit further in that reform from last year. And one of our MPs tabled a bill which would allow these areas to be enforced where people just weren't allowed to protest. And that's actually very stands to reason. And he voted for these. He actually, so he wasn't. You'd think if someone was a doctrinaire Christian, conservative, he would vote against these things, but he voted for them. He voted to ban conversion therapy, and he voted in favour of setting up these safety zones outside clinics. So it kind of tells me that he's kind of like a bit empty, I would have thought. Or maybe there are evangelicals who go to mega churches and love, respect a woman's right to choose. I don't get it, but what it also means is that I think the easiest explanation is he just doesn't believe in anything, and he'll toe whatever the party line is. So yeah.
Do they need $18,000 more a year?
The reality is we have a progressive tax system. Wealthier people pay a higher proportion of their income in tax. That's how our system is constructed.
Just
there
chill.
Is, what I'd say to you,
I wouldn't say chill, but
change the way it's structured.
Well, no, but what I'm saying is there's three.
But actually, compared to their American counterparts, yeah, they're not quite like strapping on the suicide vests yet. Let's say.
To this, right? The first bit is we're saying a short-term solution in the spirit of you want me to oppose, the government, not just criticise the government, but to propose ideas. This is a simple idea, practical, sensible, common sense. Grant Robertson could take it forward in the budget. We've foreshadowed that we'd actually...
He's actually boring me. Is he boring you? Because I've got another interview I can watch as well.
Remove taxes that we think have added costs. If you look at the Brightline test and the removal of interest deductibility...
So the other one. This is he did it earlier this week, so I think he's doing a bit of a bit sort of a media blitz where he's weren't Kiwi right wingers the ones throwing acid in the faces of people wearing masks? I think it was when the police. So there was this protest on the lawns of Parliament, and the police were getting pelted human fecal matter or human waste at them and stuff. Real disgusting feral shit. A lot of those people, I'm not going to write off the protesters because some of these people really do believe that stuff, but a good lot of that protest wasn't really about the vaccine mandates, but they were just people who were these sorts of occupations and protests and stuff. They attract a lot of neurodivergent people. Who I mean, when I say neurodivergent, I mean sort of extreme delusional sort of types, and also people who maybe have substance abuse issues. There is a lot of that there, and it feels like I'm sort of dismissing them, but it's true. It's completely true. A lot of the people at these protests needed help, and somewhere along the line they discovered this. They've become radicalized, or that, and their brains are completely broken. Half these people, and they go, but they've all been sort of scooped up in the last year and sort of put into this sort of movement. And it's quite chilling. But they're now that all this mandate stuff's over, more or less in this country, it's kind of dissipated now, and that's why. In interviews like this, they're talking about tax rather than COVID. I think COVID is people in this country have got COVID and stuff, but they're not like. I think we're sort of it seems that the COVID discourse is petering out. Whether that's good or a bad thing, I don't know. So this is this other program. This is called Te Ao with Moana, and it's on Māori television. And so the person here who's interviewing him, she's Moana Manioputo. She used to be a pop star in this country. So she has this kind of, but now she does current affairs, and I think that's really, really cool. It's like and I think what I like about her is I think her politics are kind of my politics. So we follow each other on Twitter, and we exchange often, and obviously occasionally. And I feel like I quite like her. But so he sat down with her, and this is going to be talking about Māori issues. So this is going to be quite interesting.
I speak of it as getting nervous, like I'm running out.
So yeah, we I'll see a bit of what's called pre-roll here. Here we go. That's better view. But so what happens is that he sort of appears on this show, and I think she might have been the one who broke the seal on this guy's abject sort of dismantlement. This is where our leader gets dismantled on television, and I think she was the one who thought, okay, I'm gonna sit down with him and just have at it.
Kia ora, nau mai, haere mai, welcome to Te Ao with Moana. In the space of about 6 months, Christopher Luxon, the former boss of Air New Zealand, has become a household name as leader of the National Party. No small achievement. He's only been in politics since 2020, winning the botany seat of former National MP Jamie Lee Ross. Now, leading the opposition is no walk in the park.
Fun fact, so he took the seat of this person, this politician who was caught, I don't know what he was doing, he was caught, I think he was doing sexual harassment or something, or he had some kind of scandal. And then he flamed out and became an anti-vax extremist and tried to run run under his own party banner with all these like crazy anti-vaxxers. So I mean, it's in a sense, I guess it's a good thing that this guy has the seat.
National has fielded 5 leaders in 5 years. So what makes Christopher Luxon different? I sit down for a kōrero with a non-drinker at the Kingsland pub. Kia ora, nice to meet you. Look,
I think that the mandates, I think actors losing points is because all the national faithful are going back to national detonator. I think that what's happened was that with national, under Collins, Judith Collins, who was the last leader, people detested her so badly they were willing to vote Labour. But now they've got this guy who looks like a good, stable, white businessman. That it's safe for them to go back, and I feel like ACT received a lot of those protest votes. That's why they have so many members in the House today from the last election. But now that I think ACT are losing points now because it's safe to go back to national for a lot of them. Jamie Lee Roth, Jamie Lee Ross, ROSS. So he's the illegitimate child of Jamie Lee Curtis and Ross from Friends.
We've even got a blue wall. That's how.
So nice to meet you.
Thank you.
I've watched you on telly over many, many years.
Oh, that's sweet. That's very sweet.
Well, look, it's a great honour to be with you. As I said to you, I remember you as a kid coming through watching all your music videos.
As a kid, stop there. Okay, you're already offside. Now, are you going to make it to the next election?
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Feeling confident?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. The National Party's been through some real travails over the last 3 years. Quite dysfunctional at times, to be really honest with you. I
like how that over him talking about how dysfunctional his party's been, they're showing the succession of leaders.
Yeah, we had to reset and really come together and say, righto, do you want to keep mucking around and fighting with each other, or do you actually want to focus on the New Zealand people and actually put forward our ideas and oppose the government, but also propose ideas as well?
His idea, if you remember, is tax cuts.
I think we've got a good team. We've resorted the team, got the people on the right sort of...
Okay, and just so you know, if you're from overseas watching this, he has this deputy, Nicola Willis, who's actually, funnily enough, I think I'm 2 degrees of separation from her. I know someone who knows her. But she's... And the way National Party works is that they're actually a coalition of 2 parties that were formed to oppose the labour movement in the 1930s. And so traditionally, they'll always have a quote-unquote liberal deputy and a conservative. Well, they'll alternate. They have one will be a liberal, one will be a conservative. So she's represents a sort of liberal faction of the party. But she's another example of them promoting an inexperienced man over a more experienced woman. Happened a few times as well, where it's like she's been in Parliament, she knows how Parliament works, and she's got to be the deputy to this guy who's only been in Parliament for a year. Quite embarrassing. I'd be eating shit if I was like, I'd be sitting there just why do you have to stand there and eat shit with this Dunning-Kruger fucking standing there. Whatever.
Areas that they're interested in and they can really add a lot of value with and really think about what would take the country forward.
That's true, Jamie.
So you were born in Christchurch, raised in Howick.
Yeah.
What kind of values shaped your thinking?
Well, I was really lucky. My parents both left school very young, 15, 16. They got married young. I'm the oldest of 3 boys, and young parents, but they were amazing and really incredible folk. Born in
God, that's
Christchurch,
him.
ended up coming to Auckland.
He was a
My
McDonald's.
dad was a sales rep with a company called Johnson & Johnson. We were pretty active, but I smelled terrific because I was covered.
He says this line. He said it. I think this is part of it. He's got this like list of lines. And I think this is what politicians must do. They must always like because obviously you got to say the same. You got to do your stump speech. But this thing where he says, "I always smelt good because my dad worked for Johnson & Johnson." He says that a lot, and it sounds weird.
Covered in talcum powder and all that good
Nice,
stuff.
nice.
But my mum was really instrumental in sort of shaping a lot of my values, as was Dad, because she ended up coming to university with me to do a diploma in social work, and she's gone on to become a really good, psychotherapist and counsellor in Christchurch. And so, she was always one of those people in our family that was always saying, walk across the room, try and understand someone who thinks differently.
He's actually very Christchurch. He kind of makes a bit more sense to me now that I know he's from Christchurch. I mean, just look at this classroom. Look at all of these. You'll notice that apart from maybe this kid here, yeah.
From you and value people. And so that she brought that side of it. And my dad was just an amazing enthusiast for life. If you meet him, he's just such an optimist and such positivity. And he just sort of said, look, never let your circumstances define you. And so for me, as a first in my family to go to uni, to get out and
And he says the first of his family to go to uni. It implies that his parents like clean toilets or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm the first to go in my family. I'm the first. No, actually, my brother's the first in our family to go to uni. But that doesn't mean anything. It's because back in the day, going to university wasn't like a thing you had to do. I
had 16 years overseas. I sort of learnt never to apologise for being a Kiwi overseas when you compete with the kids from Oxford or Cambridge.
Who apologises for being a Kiwi overseas? We're actually the most. Even in Britain, I did get some I lived in Britain for 13 years, and I did have some moments where I was like, I felt a bit othered and like an outsider and stuff. But it's not like there aren't many countries where New Zealanders go to where we won't be discriminated, where we have to be like unashamedly Kiwi. Such a weird thing.
Harvard or Yale or Stanford, and to be proud about being a New Zealander.
Well, you seem like a very bouncy, positive chap. What was your relationship with Te Ao Māori when you were growing up?
Yeah, it was really interesting. Very little exposure. Growing up in Christchurch,
yes,
many of you remember what
exactly.
Christchurch was like.
Listen to him. You remember what Christchurch was like? Well, it's true, eh? He's basically saying that, so when she says Te Ao Māori, she means the Māori world. What do you? How engaged are you with just Māori shit? And he's saying, well, I come from Christchurch. So I answered his question before he did.
And then because I left New Zealand when I was 25 and I was overseas for 16 years, a lot happened.
That's a bullshit answer. 25 years in this country. No, I'm not buying it, eh?
Happened, from the late mid-90s through to...
He's waffling. He's basically saying, I've never thought about Māori. I've lived in New Zealand until the age of 25, and then spent all this time overseas.
When I returned in 2011.
So what did it look like to you from that distance?
It looked. I didn't have a lot of exposure, at all, really. A little bit when I came to Auckland, but there was no teaching of Māori history in New Zealand, or deep understanding New Zealand history, really. When I came through school, what really shaped me was when I came back from New York to running New Zealand. And I went on quite a big journey there, and that was really, very exciting for me because I started to realise just the immense talent that's in the Māori community. I worked with Annie Fitzsimons on putting Tuputoa, with supporting that, which was an internship program to get Māori students into the corporate pathways of New Zealand. I went through a lot of work with Ngāti Porou, who were very kind to me, built a good relationship, and then we started talking about business that we could do together. And then there was, things like tamoko and
Yes, I remember all that drama.
Yeah, but it was a really good process to go through because essentially, we formed a network. I formed these networks inside.
So the drama she's referring to is that Air New Zealand, which he ran, I believe that they weren't allowing staff to wear traditional tattoos, and which is stupid, but also Air New Zealand. If you actually look in that part of the part of Frozen, on the tail fin, there is this traditional pattern. And what Air New Zealand does in a big way is that they appropriate a lot of Māori culture as part of it. Because, New Zealand, one thing New Zealand does have, which is a really beautiful thing, is we have this beautiful sort of indigenous culture that has a lot. Māori are craftspeople and carvers and artists. So there's just this real you're spoiled for you're just in this country, we're really spoiled for just the kind of the sort of artistry that goes on, and Air New Zealand goes and sort of just skims on the top of it and thinks, okay, we're gonna this is going to be New Zealand, yay, come to New Zealand for all of this. But if you're a member of our staff, you're not allowed to express yourself if you're Māori. Really, really cringy shit.
The company where I'd get, I had 400 Māori, Pacifica employees in a network, and giving them confidence to tell me, hey, listen, how should we be thinking about issues like this? And so tamoko was a big deal because in global aviation and global hospitality, you're not allowed to have visible tattoos. And we're the only airline in the world that does, allows people to bring their full self to work in that way.
That wasn't without a scrap though, was it?
Well, no, but I think in fairness, I think we went through that process really well. I had other people that were very good to me. Arahia Bennett was really good on, there was issues around licensing of Māori words like kia ora.
Oh yeah, this was fucked. So our national greeting is kia ora, which is just it literally means to your health. It's a great saying. It's a great phrasing because it can be a greeting, it can be a thank you, it can be a goodbye. It's just a positive affirmation. Kia ora. It's wonderful. While he was at Air New Zealand, he tried to trademark that. He tried to trademark kia ora. So, like, what the fuck? Yeah, read him. So I think one thing that New Zealand does differently than other countries is that we actually have intellectual property is something which is a collective thing. It's something which is recognised as a collective thing. So because if you think about how there's your classical law, which is, I guess, the British, let's say, colonized law, and then you have your traditional, your the way things have, there's I guess that, how do I say this without, because I could get really academic about it, but basically you can't just start telling the people that, okay, the world starts in 1840 and anything before 1840 is meaningless, and therefore there's this thing called intellectual property. We've taken your land, but we're also taking your intellectual property as well. There's no fairness in that. There's no justice in that. So there is like a recognition in this country that if you want to incorporate Maori imagery or Maori aspects of the language, some aspects, not all aspects of the language, then you need to consider the sort of the wider there's the collective intellectual property, if that makes sense. What that means is when overseas countries start appropriating, they get a lot of flack, and people overseas don't quite understand the what's it. We're a bit like here. The discourse is slightly different. But overseas, when you hear people, you see these conversations about appropriation and misappropriation, and some of them can get quite cringy, I feel, because it's all about, enforcing and people trying to enforce rules on social media and stuff like that about who can do what, who can wear what, who can say what. But here it's a bit more formalized, maybe in that respect. If you're gonna do something with a facial muka or something on it, then you have to kind of do it properly. You can't just do it. So I kind of feel that we're a bit further, I guess you should say, further along with that. But yeah.
A magazine and things like that. So for me, in New Zealand was a great experience because we embraced te reo. We started to use it on board the aircraft before it was embraced often by the broadcasters.
So Chris, those are lovely things. Those are the beautiful parts of Māori culture that help brand New Zealand, that add value. I mean, I remember when you were in the role of in the iwi development role space, holding that portfolio
for a short time.
Yeah, for a short time. But you did say very candidly that you struggle with that because as a non-Māori, you don't have that lived experience. So
I did.
What's changed within the year?
Well, I think, it's still the same reality, and the National Party in general, frankly, doesn't have enough diversity and enough of a Māori voice within it. And that's a function of a very poor election result where we actually wiped out a lot of diverse candidates as a result.
By the way, this guy, Alfred Naro, he's a piece of shit. And also he's not. I don't think he's actually Maori. I think he's Rarotongan, I think. But besides that, he's kind of It's funny that they cut to this guy as an example of National Party diversity. Jesus Christ.
And I want the National Party to be a mainstream political party. That means that we have to be able to reach out to all communities across New Zealand, and we have to become a much more diverse and inclusive place. And so that's the focus that I'm going through right now as we think about candidates for 23. And
the other thing as well is that when they talk about Indigenous rights and Māori, Te Ao Māori, and then when people start talking about diversity, that's actually quite cringy as well, because Maori's, Te Ao Māori, it isn't just another group that you can just tick off a box, right? When you're doing your diversity roll call, you're not going, oh, we need a Māori. I mean, Māoridom, and I hate that term because I know he uses it a lot, but Māori, there's a primacy to Māori culture and Māori Māori society. That to recognise that it isn't about diversity, it's about nation building. It's about respecting sovereignty. There's so much to this. It's so much deeper than just, oh, we need to get a few brown faces, which is what I'm hearing when he says that diversity.
And how we actually get the party into the right place.
Just going back to your comments, which I thought were very candid and honest about the challenges being in that space, right? So if you're Prime Minister, you're going to make critical decisions about Māori and where we are. What, in your experience, apart from your role at Air New Zealand, will help inform your decisions?
Well, I think a lot of, as I said before, like the values of just trying to understand people who are different from you and to be able to walk across a room and actually listen and engage.
Are you listening and engaging though?
Yeah, yes, I am. And I think, that's what I have learned is actually everything starts with a relationship first and foremost. And from there you can talk about the what, but actually you have to have that relationship in place to be able to have those conversations, to be able to learn, but also to be able to engage. And so I've had a number of people who've been very good with me, even in the last few months, that I've been able to just, have meetings with and sessions with and bounce off a whole bunch of issues around Māoridom. And so, they've been very generous with their time. They've been very, we haven't always...
He always looks kind of a bit flustered, huh? I just keep seeing him looking like. I think maybe it's just because he just has red complexion. That's just weird.
It's agreed in the content, but that's the point, is that there's an interchange and there's an interaction, and we coming from good intent to want to get to a better place.
if you don't have that experience, then one would expect that expert advice would be really important.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah. So what is the drama around the issue of co-governance? What does co-governance mean to you?
Yeah, well, look, co-governance is a couple of things. The first thing I'd say to you is I don't think the government's been very clear about co-governance. And I think if you went outside on the street and you asked an everyday New Zealander what is co-governance, they're unable to explain it.
But can you explain to me?
Yes, I will. But
what
what
is it?
I'd say first and foremost is
she's warming up. Moana is warming up. She's been through the it's funny because we've had like 8 minutes kind of chit chat, and she's said, said, sort of, like it's quite nice to see that what is diversity. You heard him give his spiel, and now she's going into what's co-governance mean. And now the rubber hits the road now.
Constitutional issues, whether it's been treaty settlements or things like co-governance, the government needs to come out and actually say what it is, what it isn't, and be very clear with New Zealand people. Spend your political capital, make the case, and take people with you. Otherwise, you end up in a place where things like this can become very divisive. For us on co-governance, I've got a couple of it. We've had co-governance in a past national government that's been bounded around treaty claims and really around iwi, managing local natural resources, essentially, working with local government, central government. What we now seem to be talking about is co-governance with respect to the delivery of public services. And our issue, or my issue, is sort of more, I believe, a single system with innovation and components around it, targeting people on the basis of need, partnering through devolution and through localism with iwi, with local government, can actually get better outcomes. And our party, we're really obsessed on outcomes. And when you look at polls, what are the...
Okay, so what's happening, what she's obliquely referring to, what's actually happening is that there's this reform that the government is doing at the moment, and what they're doing is that So as I believe it to be, or as I think it is, so all of our water in this country, our wastewater, our drinking water, is all handled by local authorities around the country, and so this is all critical infrastructure. This is like almost the bare minimum basis for an industrialized first world country is, I guess, people having clean drinking water, disposing clean waste, wastewater, all that stuff. But there's all these kind of the problem is that there's all these sorts of local sort of authorities who have what they call boil notices, where people who live in these regions have to boil their water before they drink it, that kind of thing. And because it's they just either don't have the money, or it's been mismanaged, or whatever. So there's a real uneven kind of delivery of water services. And so what this government is doing, this current government is doing, is they're reforming this by kind of centralizing. They're creating a new authority that will look after the whole country's water. They're kind of centralizing it. But also, what they're also doing is that they're bringing iwi in as stakeholders, which is what by iwi I mean Maori groups and as stakeholders, and this is what Labour have realised, is that co-governance can be used to sort of a social democratic kind of socialist advantage, in the sense that once you've brought Māori in as stakeholders, it'll never be privatised. Like all of these assets, this infrastructure, it can't. If you have to get the Māori to sign off on it, it's not going to be sold off to private. To this guy's mates, basically. And so in this guy's party, they can't say that out loud. They can't be like, we can't let this reform go ahead because then we could never be able to sell this junk off. We could never sell this infrastructure off to megacorp, whatever, a United States megacorporation. What they have to do is all this racist dog whistling. So what they're saying is they're talking about co-governance as being this kind of almost, existential thing about creating this two-tiered apartheid society. Real nonsense. In fact, when you in chat, when you said, I saw someone mentioned Hobson's Pledge. You got an ad for Hobson's Pledge, and what they're doing is that this is a good opportunity for someone like Luxon, this guy Luxon, to be quite sort of. He's not like, I wouldn't call him anti-Maori in the way Brash is, where Brash in his mind, in John Brash's mind, he lives to see Maori dead, basically. But he it's a good, he could do that cynical racist dog whistling and get away with it, because he can say, oh, if we reform our water in New Zealand, then what you're doing is you're letting Maori take over, and then the white man will be, you could kind of like, he doesn't have to say that out. He could just even obliquely say it. He could, and people understand what that means, right? Oh, so dirty.
Number one, number two issues for Māori, the same issues: cost of living, housing, those sorts of issues.
Yes, so do you believe that current systems are working for Māori?
No, I don't believe. I think we're constructively dissatisfied. The results and the outcomes are not the same for Māori and non-Māori.
So do you believe it's at a critical stage where we need critical solutions?
Yes, and the way I would go about it is to have a single healthcare system, and there is mechanics and innovation that we can create within it. A good example for me would be the COVID story, right? Initially, the government said, we'll just run everything centrally, thank you very much, from Wellington. And it wasn't until they engaged with Chinese communities, with language issues to get vaccination rates up, the same happened with Māori Pacifica, that we were able to use local community organisations to get to those communities.
So you're talking about service delivery, okay?
Yes, but the reason I'm doing that is because otherwise, this is a government that's added 14,000 bureaucrats at $2 billion in less than 4 years.
And a couple of years ago, when you were as part of that business advisory group, you suggested to the Prime Minister that there should be a whole new ministry set up around urban centres and planning. Now, there's a lot of money that would go into that. So is it Māori health in such crisis that we do need to pile more money in and actually be very brave and bold in our thinking?
Yeah, and all we're going to do is we're going to amalgamate, centralise and build a massive bureaucracy that will end up competing with Health New Zealand, and as a result...
No, we're not. No.
So what he's saying is, when he says amalgamate, centralise and build a massive bureaucracy, what he means is public ownership. What he means is all of these assets, this is critical infrastructure for a nation. In his mind, he thinks, you can't. That's bureaucracy. I can't make profit off that. Oh, what a cunt!
No, that's misinformation.
No,
that's misinformation.
I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think that's the way to deliver.
So you're into
I'm focused on outcomes.
You're into an assimilationist model. You want the one system that you suggest will work for everybody. In the last 40 years, there have been massive attempts to address inequities within the health system. Since 2000, there was like 220 billion thrown at it. Everybody, all the experts, the Heather Simpson report, the Māori Health Advisory Group, all the NGOs that wrote to you and David Seymour last week, the Waitangi Tribunal with its interim recommendation, they all say we need an independent Māori authority that will work in a certain way.
Yeah.
Like, none of this is that controversial. If you're watching this from overseas, you should know that what she's talking about, an independent Māori Health Authority, this is all just something which is a long time coming. It's not like this is just something that a government just invented and thought, we gotta like do it differently for Māori or something. No, it's actually, this is. As she said, everything's been tried, and well, the truth is that we actually have the precedent is actually our founding treaty. But besides that, even his party have made steps in this way. We have this thing called whānau ora, and I find it really strange that he's almost. reactionary in his like his this is about more of a measure of his impulses than any kind of thinking. His first blush impulse is to be like, no, Māori are the same as everyone. We're going to treat them like everyone. It's a very colonizer mindset, isn't it? Where you're sort of Māori are just these people. It's very the Jordan Peterson thing, where you can frame something as being anti-racist when all you're doing is steamrolling over another culture and benefit of your own. So, yeah.
Why do you not trust expert advice?
No, because I think we'll end up creating a massive amount of bureaucracy, and by their own admission, the Māori Health Authority won't deliver a single improved health outcome for Māori in 5 years.
What is your proposal except to tweak a system that,
not to tweak a system.
has been tweaked ad nauseum and not worked?
Yeah, so that it hasn't been tweaked. One of the things that you could do is embrace fully and execute fully the social investment model that Bill English was talking about.
Do you trust Māori to come up with solutions?
Absolutely.
So why are you not listening to
Māori? And that's what we could do, like in terms of...
Fuck me, she's going at it, eh? What I like about her style is that she's I don't think I'd sit down and she's asking really tough questions, but you don't think she's I wouldn't take it personally if she was asking these questions of me. Maybe I would, because I wish she wouldn't. but at the same time, do you know what I mean? Like, she's giving it hard. She's going hard, but I don't.
A single healthcare system with a Māori health directorate within the Ministry of Health. We could have iwi partnership boards that actually work very well.
Chris, I used to work in health.
Yes.
I was a national Māori smoke-free coordinator. There was a Māori directorate in there. They struggled in there. This is well documented.
Yeah, so why don't we make it more efficient and more effective?
Because everybody's tried for the last 40 years.
Yeah, this is Dunning-Kruger shit. He's basically like, well, I'll just make it more efficient. As if he he's only been in politics a year, and he doesn't. I don't think he really understands quite how government moves, and he's sort of like thinking, oh, I'll just make previously he said really weird comments like, I'll just make a phone call to every hospital to find out how their COVID strategy is going or something. He's treating it like he's running an airline or something, where this is where the competencies of a CEO are different to a competency of a politician, because a government is very different to a corporation. There's so many moving parts. Yeah, he just wants privatization. That is true. You don't know why he's getting no. Well, this is funny. You say that, Sarah Jessica Fart, because I think he's trying to model himself as a new kind of a national leader, because all the other ones have just been such fuck-ups. And I think part of the strategy is try and as of last week, the strategy was to just do a big tour of all the media. And yeah, the audience here, obviously, if you're watching Māori television, you're watching Moana, Te Ao with Moana. You're probably not his constituency, although he has been talking about running candidates in Māori electorates, which is I find interesting. So maybe he's trying to soften up the Māori viewership. I don't know, but he's definitely failing big time. He's not I give him credit, I guess, going into a Māori audience and telling them their lives are meaningless. Like that takes some chutzpah, doesn't it? Like to be like, health outcomes, like health outcomes aren't working, but I'll just make it more efficient for you. Like, this is this is these people which the Dunning-Kruger was made to describe. Like, it describes perfectly. He just thinks that, yeah, I'll just make it work.
Yeah, but look what's happened in the last 4 years. We've removed all healthcare targets out of the system.
You guys like to chop things back, tax and blimmin' strip it back.
No, I think that's a bit unfair.
I think that's pretty apt, really.
they cut after that. She's like, you guys just like to text. You guys have to just strip away, don't you? It's true though. It's true. I think that's what it is. I like about her interview style. She's quite casual. She goes to quite a sort of. It's quite disarming, where she just says, "You blimmin' like to strip it back." I mean, I know American talk, maybe cable news is maybe a bit more like that, but we don't have that in this country. Like you'll see compared to the last guy. The last guy was a lot more formalized, a lot more sort of like. He had to be a lot more. Every hair was brushed. Do you know what I mean? Because combed straight. But what I like about Moana is she's more of. There is that sort of much more of a human approach. She's much more sort of like, you're just blimmin' gonna strip things back. Yeah.
After the break, more on what matters to Māori with Christopher Luxon.
More what matters to Māori with Christopher Luxon. Also, he prefers Christopher to Chris, even though his Twitter handle says Chris. So I think he just decided like last month.
The Health Authority, you've got Health New Zealand, they co-commission community and primary services and
you don't think there'll be a lot of conflict, complexity?
Why would there be? They've got the co-chair on this body is sitting on that one. If anything, it's going to be streamlined and focused. I mean, why don't we try something bold and different?
What I'd love us to try is to properly implement social investment, where we actually target people.
I like what she said there. She's asked, why can't we be bold and different? Because she's basically by implication, she's saying to him, because he's been like, he's pretending he's Steve Jobs. He's pretending he's a visionary leader or something. I mean, really, he's just a grey suit from a frickin' like, I don't know, like he's who sells toothpaste, do you know? And like, so it's kind of like, she's saying, why don't you be more bold and why don't you be more like Elon Musk or something? No, well, Jamie, I mean, like, look, Steve Jobs was a super capitalist, right, on every front. But I will say that I think just like you can kind of separate authoritarian leaders into sort of these two camps. You have your Bolsonaro Trumps, who are just absolute clown shows, and then you have your Erdogan Putins, who the Bolsonaro Trumps wish they were, who will sit down and think about, oh, how can we get the army on side? So when I consolidate power, how can I bring every single ministry under my control? This real Machiavellian stuff. And I think the same goes with these sort of capitalists. You have these people who are like Steve Jobs. I'm not going to say it to his credit, but there are very few people who and I guess on that scale of corporation, maybe probably since Henry Ford or something, where you have someone who puts their personality, like rules a company, like Steve Jobs did, where the whole production of the item of the product and everything is all very much a part of the personality of the person who made it, Steve Jobs didn't do much of business. You might say that, but he's definitely very skilled as a marketer and very good at product development. And it sounds like I'm ringing his praises, and I guess I do use Apple computers, but like I think there are other people, is what I'm trying to say. You contrast that with other business people who look to the Steve Jobs model and think he's a visionary, and I'm like that too. People like, if you look at like someone like Elizabeth Holmes, Elon Musk probably thinks he's a bit like Steve Jobs. You know, Elizabeth Holmes, who tries to literally emulate him by wearing the black turtlenecks and stuff. And so when you have this guy, Christopher Luxon, when he goes, when he says everyone, I used to run Air New Zealand. So the brand of Air New Zealand. Oh yeah, no, absolutely, Jamie J. That is true too. That is true. That's very much politically, yeah, businessy shit, yeah. But like, so this guy says he runs Air New Zealand. The reason why he says I ran Air New Zealand and didn't spend 30 years in Unilever is because Air New Zealand is has a well-regarded brand, not just in New Zealand but overseas. It always has nice wine when you're in the when the flight attendants come. They'll always give you really good wine. They'll always give you a nice little boiled sweet at the end. It's got really nice design aesthetics. Their uniforms, they always get like top designers doing the uniforms. It has a very, people understand that to be a sort of gold, that sort of blue ribbon kind of company, like with a strong brand personality. And he was a point, and when he became CEO of Air New Zealand, he didn't do any of that stuff. He just cut costs basically, and basically sort of turned the company into kind of a husk. Like, he didn't have any regard for the employees. And also, funnily enough, it doesn't get stated enough, Air New Zealand is a state-owned asset. It's I think 60% or 51%. It's like at least half owned by the state of New Zealand. And so it's funny when he was basically a state employee, and he never really acknowledges that, and he never really sort of, yeah, I find that interesting.
And support people on the basis of need. We're not doing them.
But your idea is really just to reform within. We're looking for transformation.
I am too. I want those outcomes to be gone.
When you're on that business...
Yeah, detonator. John Key made it 51%. Yeah, so it got bailed out by, it's funny enough, so Air New Zealand got bailed out by I think it got bailed out twice, didn't it? First by a Labour government and then by a national government, because it used to be completely state-owned, but then it got privatised, probably by a Labour government, and then, but it's one of these things which is just too big to fail. So it's just gonna, and I think in the last round when COVID hit, because we closed our borders and Air New Zealand had to lay off staff, the government gave it a loan, when really what the government should have done was have bought out that remaining 51%. But I thought that was a real wussy move by our finance minister. But I did think that it just goes to show that the government is such a stakeholder of Air New Zealand that the New Zealand public has an interest in our national carrier. So it's yeah, interesting.
Business advisory group. Why was it that when you were dedicated to changing infrastructure and you recognised that it was in a critical state, that you said to the Prime Minister, things are intergenerational, systemic issues here, we need to really be bold and tip things over and think big? So why?
Think big. See, she's saying, why we need to tip. He wants to, this is where he gave his pitch where he's like, in his mind, he's Steve Jobs, in his mind, he's New Zealand he's going to do a presentation and he's going to present this country like the new iPad or something. But really, he's the guy from accounts. He's the guy who's like, oh, we lost 2% last quarter. Who do we have to lay off to, that's who he is.
Is it that when it comes to Māori health, you're not thinking the same?
I am thinking boldly, but what I'm saying to you is I think there's a different model, and I don't think we've fully explored or pushed that model really well or very hard. You keep framing it as it's the same model. I'm talking about something quite different. I'm saying to you there's something called social investment. We need to be able to use data. We need to be able to identify the need. We need to be able to really put huge resources into solving it.
Why do you think that the Māori Health Authority idea isn't based on data and research?
I'm just saying to you, I don't think, I've seen it happen already. We've taken all the polytechnics and put them all together into one big mega entity. We're taking all the DHBs, as imperfect as they are, and throwing them all into one big entity. We're taking all the 3 waters out of 67 district councils.
So what he's saying here is that he doesn't like that. So this government is doing that very sort of, very social democratic-y statist kind of thing. It's rolling everything into these kind of consolidating and centralizing control. And part of, I mean, there's an interesting argument there, you know, localism versus centralism. Part of why New Zealand is a lot more progressive than other countries, including Australia generally, is because we have a very strong central government. We don't have it's not a federal system or anything like that. When laws get made, when social change happens, when change occurs in this country, it gets rolled out across the country, and that's that. And so, what's happening now is that we have this kind of consolidation happening because we're kind of, obviously all of this stuff has been kind of, it was pulled apart in the 80s and 90s, and now it's been sort of sewn back together. That's the way I look at it. And he's just going to resist this because, well, as Detonator says, he just wants privatization, doesn't he? Strangely, having been a state employee, he wants privatization. So
throwing them back into 4 big entities. That doesn't work. It just builds massive bureaucracy. We've had 14,000 bureaucrats at $2 billion added in 4 years in this government.
You were quite keen to start something else with a whole bunch of bureaucrats.
No, but what I'd say to you is that's $2 billion that you could have spent on Māori health outcomes.
Okay.
Well, that's the irony when you say bureaucracy hand-wringing. And I think someone earlier said back earlier that, you know, these CEOs are basically corporate bureaucrats. He just strikes me as he doesn't come across as anyone who has any big grand ideas for this country. He's delegating, and he's just reading lines that have been prepared by staffers. He's just doing middle management nonsense. And that, you know, he comes across, and it's just really strange that he's the biggest bureaucrat and probably in the front benches of Parliament in that respect. Like, yeah, let's reduce his salary then, Lux, and let's see how that pans out. Well, I think he could happily survive on not being paid. He owns like 5 houses or something.
It's taxpayers' money that actually has been wasted, that actually hasn't gone to delivering outcomes, right?
So the former Treaty Settlements Minister,
Chris
Finlayson told our show that we need to reappraise the relationship between Kāwanatanga and Rangatiratanga.
Chris Finlayson, who was a former treaty negotiator, well, in this country we have this thing called the Waitangi Tribunal, which is where illegal land seizures can be get redress from the states, and so the last National Party treaty negotiator was this guy called Chris Finlayson. Fascinating chap, really fascinating chap. He was like this conservative Catholic gay guy. Get your head around that. Like, probably self-flagellates. I read on his Wikipedia entry he's celibate. He's a celibate gay guy. He's probably married to the Virgin Mother or something. I don't know. I don't mean to offend if any of you people who are watching are Catholic, but he's someone who this guy's party needs, because like this guy Chris Finlayson, conservative Catholic, social conservative, National Party, on paper not necessarily someone who maybe I would have go mud wrestling with or whatever. Do you know? But he's certainly someone you could do business with, and someone who had a pragmatism about him, and someone who was able to really engage with the treaty process, treaty settlement process, and his party doesn't have any of those kind of really learned people on board anymore. So that's really, yeah, a real shame.
What does the treaty mean to you? What does that reappraisal of kāwanatanga and rangatiratanga, what does that look like in action to you?
Well, for me, what it means is that we are...
Okay, so this is a very important aspect. Like, after we've done this, we can sort of move on, because this is actually like this is the money question. What does the treaty mean to the leader of the National Party? So if you're watching this from overseas, in this country, our founding document is called, well, we have two founding documents, or several founding documents, but we have this treaty that was signed between the British Crown and the most Māori leaders of the time, and it agreed upon the terms of how power would be shared, basically how power would be shared in this country. And so there's always been lots of interesting, particularly in the last couple of decades, there's been a lot more reappraising of it. But it's good to be able to have this on Māori television, actually have someone ask Christopher Luxon, what does the treaty mean to you? What does this mean to you? So,
between kāwanatanga and rangatiratanga, what does the treaty mean to you? What does that reappraisal of kāwanatanga and rangatiratanga, what does that look like in action to you?
Well, for me, what it means is that we are first and foremost one sovereign state, you know.
And when she says kāwanatanga and rangatiratanga, she means roughly governance and sovereignty. And she's actually using the Māori words. I think she's using it deliberately there.
Secondarily, yes, rangatiratanga. We want to be able to see devolution and localism, where iwi have control over, you know, as we've seen in treaty settlements, local resources. I think those are good models. Healthcare, education, there is components, as I said, within the single system that's quite possible where there is actually really good influence over Māori for Māori outcomes. That's great. We're very supportive of all of that. And then finally, all of us are fully equal under the law in New Zealand. And so that's our...
Do you understand the difference between equal and equity, though?
Yes, I do.
Yeah. So the treaty, Te Tiriti, is all about co-governance. It is the ultimate co-governance model. How do you respond to that?
Well, I think the treaty's been very good for New Zealand. I think it's made us a much better, tolerant, open country as we've tried to work out what it means. But there are different interpretations of it and there are different understandings of it. We're not aligned in a common understanding of that. And that's why I think the government should make a case for what is co-governance and where are we going with it.
That's a really weird answer, isn't it? He says the treaty's been very good for this country and has made us more open and tolerant and stuff. That's possibly true, but there's many different interpretations and means many different things to many people. And that's a real hand waving. That's like something you'd say if you're giving a book report, isn't it? You know, you can say that about anything. The American Constitution means a lot of different things, has different interpretations. You can say that about anything.
Fundamentally, co-governance as a concept is not well articulated or understood. In New Zealand's history, whether it's been national or Labour governments, something like treaty settlements, everybody said, hey, listen, we're on board with that. That sounds great. You know, we need to try and address wrongs from the past, as imperfect as it has been, but that's a good thing that's taken New Zealand people on that journey. We haven't done that here on co-governance, right? I appreciate in Māoridom there might be a really good understanding and literacy around what we're actually going, you know, what it's about and where it may be going to. But that's not clear to everybody in New Zealand. That's not fair, right?
You're not helping. You're not helping with that conversation because you're using words like separatism.
I'm not.
You have used words like separatism.
I'm saying to you, two systems.
He must be gaslighting her, eh? Because he's used these words. He's been. Do you know what it is? This is why he's just such a shit. Maybe he's a good politician for this, but like. He thinks maybe he just assumes that no one's going to see this outside of Māori television, and he can go down to his the audience in Christchurch, and say like there's these Māoris who are separatists and they're taking over, and he can say all that stuff, and then appear in front of this woman on Māori television and be like, that's not me. No, I think people just don't understand what co-governance is. It's such a weasel.
Doesn't work for us, right? I'm saying to you, I think a single system that can really target people on the basis of need, partner with different community organisations, different businesses, working together to deliver those outcomes is important.
This system is seen by many Māori as hugely separatist. There are barriers to access to advice and care. It is one system which is not designed by and for Māori.
But you can create components within it, right?
We've had components.
But we could do it better. We can do it much better.
So can I just ask you, like, genuinely, do you think that it's feasible that Māori would have ceded sovereignty?
Oh, I've got to save you this question because, like, what do you think his response is going to be? Because the right answer is the obvious one is that Māori didn't seize sovereignty because there's never really been any people. You can't take any people anywhere in the history of humanity, right? A distinct nation of people, and then said, do you want to give up sovereignty? Just sign here and give up your sovereignty. Do you think that actually happens? Like, of course it doesn't. And if it did, it would be under duress, right? So that's why we have lots of legal precedent which says that the Treaty of the Treaty of Waitangi and Te Tiriti o Waitangi, the different versions, they all point to the same thing, and that's that Māori had agreed to a particular kind of dual sovereignty, if any, like, or a governance of their, sovereignty over their own land and resources, basically, and because that would be the only version that would make sense, logically or otherwise, evidentially. But it's almost like a mythologizing, like in this country, it's become this sort of a meme that's been mythologized so much, which I think, now I'm going to predict almost what he said. I don't want to make a fool of myself, but I think that I think I know what he's going to say. If she asked this.
Outcomes is important.
This system is seen by many Māori as hugely separatist. There are barriers to access to advice and care. It is one system which is not designed by and for Māori.
But you can create components within it, right?
We've had components.
But we could do it better. We can do it much better.
So can I just ask you, like, genuinely, do you think that it's feasible that...
I love how she does this. Can I just ask you? Just oh, she's so cool.
Māori would have ceded sovereignty.
Well, that's I think we are one sovereign country. Article 1 of the treaty. That's what that's about.
Te tiriti.
Of the treaty.
Te tiriti. What is in
well,
te tiriti? No, what is in te tiriti?
Well, what I'm saying to you is,
yeah. So here's where the rubber hits the road. So we have two versions, basically. There's two documents. One's called the Treaty of Waitangi, and the other one is called Te Tiriti o Waitangi, and they're both similar but different documents, and they were both presented at the same time. One was signed by a few people, and the other one was signed by several hundred. The one that's signed by several hundred is the one that she is citing here, and I suspect that he probably doesn't even realise there's two versions. He probably doesn't realise there's one called Te Tiriti. He thinks she's correcting him. He thinks she's like he's saying the treaty, he thinks she's saying, no, he thinks she's being trying to be politically correct. And, don't call it the treaty, call it Te Tiriti. That's what he's thinking in his mind. But he doesn't actually realise, no, she's referring to this other document and asking him. And that's why he's looking so dumbfounded, because he's actually that stupid. He's actually this stupid. He's someone who wants to become the leader of this country, and he's never even thought about any of this stuff. My Lord. And he's going on Māori television. Yeah. So
I'm looking at the articles going, first article is really about ceding sovereignty,
No,
that we're
it's
one
not.
country. The second article is about rangatira.
Jesus Christ. He just went out and said that. Did you hear that? He just said it. He said it out loud. He said, the treaty's about ceding sovereignty. This is like this guy was, it's like the 1950s shit.
That the people can
So
have.
you're talking about the English text that was signed by about 50 people. Do you think that Māori, who have been in the majority, having the conversation in Māori, would have said, here?
So why don't we have a government that comes out and gives us a common understanding then, if that's the case?
It's all through the
New
Waitangi
Zealanders.
Tribunal research.
But why don't we make it clear to 5 million New Zealanders, if that's the case, that what is the government's interpretation of the treaty and co-governance and where that's all going?
Chris, you often say that what we need is an intelligent conversation around co-governance and even the UN UNDRIP. How prepared are you for that conversation?
Well, I'm up for that conversation. That's why I'm here with you today.
This guy's a piece of shit. I can't believe it. I mean, like, I thought he was. I just thought that he was gonna be like, he would say something a bit more vague than Article 1 cede sovereignty. Wow, that's real. That's actual real. That is like real. Like, I don't even think. Like, that's what this the guy in chat, Dissinator in chat, said was mentioned Hobson's pledge. We have a group in this country who are sort of racist treaty denialists. They have this kind of radical interpretation of this country's founding document, which says that basically in 1840 we became all the things that happened since 1840 were agreed to by Māori, basically, as their interpretation. And this what this guy's done is I don't think he understands this, because he's probably thick as pig shit. Is that he's actually signed off. He signed off on this racist group's agenda, and he's not only done that, but he's done it on Māori television. I mean, this just blows my mind. This is like something which I can't. I mean, if you're from overseas, you can't. I mean, I can't really I can't understate it, or I can't overstate it, as it were. He's gone on to he's running this country's centre-right party. He's gone on to Māori television and told what I would presume would be a Māori viewership, and said, "You guys ceded sovereignty." Like, what the fuck was he thinking? Like, what the fuck? I don't think that even the most charitable thing you could say about that is that he just lacks political instincts. That he just kind of doesn't understand the game. He doesn't understand what are you doing, mate? Like, I think Sarah Jessica Farser said earlier, like, he shouldn't have just gone on at all, because the outcome of these these appearances are a net negative, maybe. Like, because all it is it just shows to us that all it does is confirms to us he knows nothing about our constitution, our constitutional subjects. he doesn't have any kind of consideration. He does this talks big game about engaging with Maori, and I guess it's sweet that he's gone on this show to try and do that, but then reveals himself to be completely untutored on Maori issues, to the extent that he thinks Maori signed away their sovereignty. And this isn't just opinion either. This is a settled fact, right? This is settled fact that Maori did not sign away their sovereignty. Okay, it's a white. He's repeating white mythology. This is mythological stuff he must have heard growing up when he was in Christchurch. He probably might also think that the Moriori were eaten by Maori. He probably has all this kind of like underneath the layers. There's all this kind of weird shit that's going to come out of this guy's mouth if you give him enough, if you ask him enough questions. Because this is that answer he gave there is completely unacceptable, and I mean, it's not unacceptable to those people in Christchurch, but like, I don't mean to pick on people in Christchurch. I know some good people from Christchurch. Some of them are good people, as Trump would say, but like, they're like, his constituency won't care what he says on this interview. And maybe he might even help his case if they heard what he said, because he'd be, they'll be going, oh yeah, he's giving it to that Maori woman, but he's just not doing it. He's just not doing it effectively. If you want to be racist, at least be, I don't know, unashamedly balls out fucking Clancy or something. But rather than just this kind of, he's like this kind of almost this white privilege, like I don't like the term white privilege, gets overused, but he's that kind of the overly privileged sort of, like, I used to use that Dunning-Kruger thing where it's like, but it's like, as an analogy, but it is that kind of person who just blunders into these things. He thinks he's smart enough to just, I'm going to have a sit down with this lady. She's used to be a pop star. She's going to give you a nice little, maybe I'll get a nice little hug out of it. He thinks he's going to get a nice little cuddle sesh out of this. And then she asks him straight up, like, well, what's the tutiriti? And he says straight up, well, I know Article 1 was when you gave away all your land. Like, what the fuck? I'm trying to find an American analogy. I think it's that kind of, I think the sort of analogy might be that the slaves liked being slaves. I think that might be the kind of, as close as it gets, where people sort of, they paint this picture of the past and think, well, slavery wasn't that bad because some of the slave owners used to feed them and house their slaves. So that sounds all right, doesn't it? Like, despite the whole issue of the legitimacy of slavery and the fact that the liberty and all of that kind of stuff. That's what he's doing. This guy's doing with the treaty. He's saying that, well, the treaty served us quite well because Maori haven't been genocided or anything, but like, but they gave away their sovereignty, didn't they? Do like, that's not actually how history will tell you a different story. And furthermore, what's even funnier is that earlier in this interview, he lamented the fact that as he was growing up, he never learnt Maori history or New Zealand history. So that's actually really sad, because he's more or less explained that he doesn't know shit. And then when he reveals he doesn't know shit, what I don't understand is why he expects to run this country. To be able to because if this was a job interview, if this was like any other, because politics, you can get away with trying to appeal to many people rather than a panel of 3 or whatever. But if I was tuning up to a job interview and said something as grossly just messed up as that, which won't make big press, by the way. I haven't seen it. I've seen clips of this on my Twitter, but I haven't seen like it hasn't become like a big meme that he's completely unaware of treaty issues. But I feel like if you turn up to a job interview and just took a shit on the job applicant's table or the interviews panel's table, and then said, well, shall I see you in a week's time then, or something? You know, this just, you have to be like, there has to be the ultimate in privilege, your mindset, to just think that this is acceptable.
I'm coming on your show because, you know, we want to discuss these issues. I've given you a different perspective. I appreciate it's not your perspective, but I'm actually I'm putting forward what I think and what we think.
Christopher Luxon was literally a high flyer at Air New Zealand. It was regularly voted the world's best airline, and it was profitable with it. But making profits for a corporation is way different to spending it, which prime ministers have to do. So your previous jobs that you had, very impressive. That's all about maximising profit, making profit, and you did very...
I disagree with that. I think if you're a modern CEO in the 2020s, like I was, I think if you look at what I did at Air New Zealand with respect to, you know, advancing Māori Pacifica within that business, actually if you think about what I did around domestic violence, paid 3-week holidays, you know, paid 3-week annual leave for perpetrators and also victims. I think I did a lot around...
He gave annual 3-week leave for perpetrators of domestic violence. That's interesting. I'm interested to know what that means. If anyone knows if that's a thing, I'd like to know what that actually means. If you can perpetrate domestic violence, get 3 weeks off work. That's interesting.
Understanding that Air New Zealand wasn't just about maximising profit.
If you didn't make money, though, you might have been tossed out.
Sure, that's a job, but that's the same job here. You've got to get the economy working right, because if you want to make investments to deal with the inequities that we've got in our system, you have to have a strong economy.
And you've got to spend money. Is that a little bit against the grain from being a CE?
I made investments and spent money all the time. I think that's the thing, is you like to stereotype me as a CEO and say...
You like to stereotype me as a CEO. Yeah, Darren, that's it. I think it could be a gaffe, and the problem with him is that he doesn't understand. He says these things, and everyone just takes him at his word, and then a day later he has to walk people back. He has to walk it all back. Like he did this thing where he said that under his next government, it'll be Bill English and Nicola Willis will be running the books. And Bill English was the last finance minister under the last national government. So people are saying, wait, Bill English is coming back? And I think he meant to say someone else. And no one's called him on it because everyone's still asking, wait, he's bringing this guy back? Is this guy going to be in your front lineup? What? And I think what happened was that he meant to say someone else. And he just does these kind of flubs, these real sort of... I kind of like, I could sympathise, I guess, because I could never be a politician to have that kind of attention to detail. I could really, I guess why I guess what I respect Jacinda Ardern for is that she can communicate really well. She talks very clearly. I feel very honoured that the small amount of people who are watching this stream are watching, that I'm able to talk, and you guys can understand me on that. I can't talk like that, you know. I can only talk casually, like I'm talking to you now. He, you know, to be a politician takes some real control and adherence to speech and, you know, precise speech and stuff. And I guess you could be like Trump and just let it all hang out and not give a fuck. But in this case, yeah, he just says stuff, and it's probably, I don't know what he was meaning by that. 3 weeks for victims and perpetrators of domestic violence. But okay.
That's
No.
a certain type of person that's only obsessed with money. If you're a good CEO, you care about all stakeholders in a business, not just shareholders.
Can you hear that? It's quite loud, eh?
Do you know that how he says all stakeholders in the business, not just shareholders? He doesn't say, he didn't actually want to say staff, because that would open up a conversation about his engagement with the unions. And I think that would be, if I was going to interview him, I would ask, I have a lot of questions, actual sincere questions that I'd like to know more about. But because if he was the CEO of Air New Zealand, probably more than any other CEO in this country, he would have had more, just by virtue of the company he's in, he would have more engagement with the unions, because airline CEOs have to speak to the union. They have to speak to the union. And so I'd actually be really interested to know about that. Not just like, oh, I've had a good engagement. I'd like to know more about his record in that respect. And obviously the customers. This is why you can't translate being a CEO to being a politician, because stakeholders in a company, you can't say, oh, the shareholders are the voters or the customers are the voters. No, we're all of those things. We're the workers. We're everything. And yeah, oh, he's such a knob end. Literally, like look at that knob.
Is that the police helicopter, is it?
Yeah, they always come around.
20% increase in serious crime under this government.
I think they put that in just to make him look more human. Darren, I did. If you rewind, I actually did go through the Q&A first, and I kind of got bored with it because it was just him waffling about tax, and I find tax, like most people, I find tax to be the most boring subject in the world. So I just kind of, maybe he said something a bit juicier after he said that he didn't know what he was going to cut.
Do you believe that institutional and structural racism exists?
I think there's
good question.
I think there's bias in different organisations. I think we're doing a better job of working it out and being more aware of it. I've been in organisations where we've gone on big journeys around that.
So he doesn't believe structural racism exists.
Is that about people going on their individual journey to understand how their decisions impact on others, or is it about structural kind of change?
No, I think a lot of it, from my own experience, it's been, I arrived at Air New Zealand, 16% of our top 100 jobs were held by women. That didn't make any sense. If you can't deal with gender, you can't deal with ethnicity, you can't deal with sexual orientation, other elements of diversity as well. And so really it was understanding, yes, there was unconscious bias in our organisation around that, and so we went on a process.
He fucking talks about diversity like he's this is what I hate about this is this kind of corporate nonsense where diversity is an important thing, but when it hits people like him, it just becomes this real fucking superficial box ticking nonsense where he's just like, okay, now to be a good CEO, I must have blah blah blah. I need to have a brown person on my team to. It becomes this to sign off on my anti-Maori diatribes. My gosh.
Because of that, and we were able to in 2 years be able to fix that and have 45% women in those top 100 jobs.
You said something about the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous People, that we need to have another conversation around that, about how that can be implemented. So that was signed in 2010. Did John Key drop the ball because he never had a conversation with the public about it?
So John Key hasn't actually, like the National Party, they have quite a sort of a, depending on your end of the political spectrum, so your mileage may vary, right? But like, if you're Maori, like I've heard this from Maori who will say, okay, Labour will stab you in the back, National will stab you in the front. There is that, like if you go into that end of it, and then you get to this more sort of more reconciliatory sort of end, conciliatory end. But so I would say that National's record on, not on Maori outcomes overall, but on the treaty settlement process, isn't altogether bad, and I think that he had people who could speak, who were able to. John Key, I mean, had like the guy Chris Finlayson. He knew his stuff. He was a top lawyer, do you know. But yeah, when you've got a guy who's like trying to trademark Kia ora, who doesn't have any of that kind of advice on his staff, what's he going to do? What's he going to do?
Out there.
No, I think it was a really good thing to do, and we support that. But the UNDRIP thing didn't mean that the logical conclusion was Hapuapua. It was left to individual countries to act with their own discretion as to what that could mean for them.
Hapuapua is just a discussion.
No, but these two issues have got linked because Hapuapua. But again, the government wasn't clear about that, right?
But Hapuapua is just a discussion document.
So Hapuapua, if you don't know, it's just what she says. It's just, there's a document that the government created, simply called Hapuapua, and it's just basically a memo about, like, okay, so how do we talk about co-governance, the sort of stuff that she's been talking about, that's been mentioned in their conversation. And the right has turned, I'm not talking about the right. When I say the right, I don't mean him. I mean people on the far right, people who are people who deranged Telegram maniacs, people on Telegram. That sort of right, the people who would send a pig's head to a mosque, kind of right wing. They've built this whole mythology around Hapuapua, and Hapuapua has become this, like, I think, like Agenda 21, where it's become this kind of like, this is the roadmap to total Maori domination. where they're going to send white people to concentration camps or something. This is when the white people get genocided. Here it's going to be called Hapuapua. And obviously they can't pronounce it. They call it something like "Hey Pera Pera" or whatever they say. And the fact that he mentioned it is already showing that these just how much these ideas have entered the mainstream. The fact that he mentioned it, and the fact she didn't just shut him down and say, that's bullshit, don't mention that, you fucking psycho. Because that's what my reaction would be like, stop it right there, we're not going to do this nonsense, right? But she's trying to, she's saying, she's factually correcting him and saying it's just a discussion document. But the fact he even mentioned it, this like minor little this thing that someone wrote, how do we engage Maori better? This is you could read it, you can look it up online. It's just, there's nothing to it. But the fact that he's talked about this as being this kind of, it's like a smoking gun that New Zealand's going to have white genocide. It's just absolutely fucked up. And also, he's saying this on Māori television. This is just funny. He doesn't have that awareness. It's like, maybe it's like spatial awareness. Like he doesn't understand the audience. Like John Key, like the last guy, didn't agree with him, but I give him credit for having political instincts. He knew who he was talking to. He knew how what he said would be perceived. He knew how to do, strategic gaffes. But like this guy, he's a gaff machine. He's just going to rattle off any old far right shit, and he doesn't even realise it's like far right. He's just been fed this.
That lays out a spectrum of answers.
Absolutely, so that's how it was presented after the document was, revealed as to what it was.
But now
revealed.
Well, we do.
After that document was revealed.
But again, the government should be.
After that document was revealed, it's like something out of fucking National Treasure or something. Like there was the secret document which the Freemasons created that that outlined how New Zealand would be overrun by the brown peril. You know, this is what he's kind of. This is kind of the way he's talking. Even if he isn't talking this way, this is how it's been perceived. This is how I'm listening to him say it. Like, because I'm aware of how these conversations have gone. You can go online, look up He Puapua, look at how people are talking about it on Twitter. They're talking about it like it's the Freemasons or something. It's a nothing. It's absolutely nothing. And he's talking about it like it's a fucking political issue. Yeah, that's dissonation. That's the analogy. He thinks it's the elders of the protocols. They treat He Puapua like it's the protocols of Zion. Like, this is when they sat down and decided how New Zealand would be taken over by a Maori. Okay, and it's obviously for these like fucking shit, like these fucking chuckle fucks, you know, who will like who beat their wives after the All Blacks lose the rugby. This is the kind of the sort of audience who would probably be like receptive to this kind of stuff, and he's on Māori television saying it. Oh my lord.
Be proactive and spend its large political capital, make the case and take the New Zealand people with them on the journey they want to go on. That's what we've done on constitutional matters before. That wasn't clear to New Zealand, everyday New Zealanders sitting out there in the main street. So I think the bottom line is, yes, I mean, UNDRIP was something, but it's not a logical conclusion. He Puapua isn't a logical conclusion of UNDRIP.
How do you intend to attract the Māori vote and even candidates?
Good question. What he thinks is he's going to go on shows like this and going to be like, kia ora. No, sorry. Kia ora. And he's going to be like, yeah, guess what? Your lives are meaningless and you ceded sovereignty, and there's a secret plan, blah blah blah, and that's why he brought the UN into it. This is UN. This is actually legitimately. He's legitimately conspiracy mongering. That is actually really wild. Really wild. I'm surprised no one's picked up on that. Because I've seen everyone's picked up on the fact that he hasn't, like on Twitter, everyone's talked about how he doesn't understand the treaty thing. And I like, that was the thing which drove me wild. I mean, if you go back on this video, you'll see I just completely was emotionally my mind was became imploded on that answer about the treaty or Te Tiriti. But I think that's overshadowed the fact that he's just gone here and conspiracy mongers. He's gone here and actually talked some far right horseshit, but he's chosen the wrong audience, And so, sorry, yeah, just to get back on, she's going to ask about how does he expect to win the Māori vote. Well, let's hear his answer, shall we?
That's what we've done on constitutional matters before. That wasn't clear to New Zealand, everyday New Zealanders sitting out there in the main street. So I think the bottom line is, yes, I mean, UNDRIP was something, but it's not a logical conclusion. He Puapua isn't a logical conclusion of UNDRIP.
How do you intend to attract the Māori vote and even candidates?
What I'd say to you is I've had a great outreach with candidates over summer, people that previously had no interest in running for the National Party, but are now very excited about what's happening with our leadership changes. So
I wonder who's excited about, who has never thought about running for National and is excited about his leadership changes and now is thinking of running. So I'm quite interested to know when he rolls out his list of candidates. There's going to be some real shifty fuckers, I'm telling you what.
the had some great conversations. We've had 290 people put their hands up for what we call National 101, people wanting to explore candidacy. 90% of them we've never met before as a party. So I don't have a problem. I think we'll have some outstanding Māori candidates in this upcoming election. I'm thinking of 2 or 3 already that we've had.
2 or 3 people already. They're probably people who he's worked with in the past or something that he's shoulder tapped. He's probably thinking, who was that person who helped me try to trademark Kia ora? Oh, I'll get her to be an MP. Or something like that.
Had conversations with. And so, the reality is, if we're going to be a national party, when you look at it, we have to be a national party. And that means talking and presenting our centre-right politics, principles and beliefs to all communities across New Zealand. And that's what I'm really committed to doing.
This is just generic waffle. So it seems like he's got 2 modes. He has this kind of generic boardroom waffle sort of moments where he says, I'm really interested in diversity. We had a really good National 101 conference, which we had 220 people attend, and we've seen a really good influx of candidates who will take this party to the next level. They're very positive about a change of leadership. He has that that waffle, that patter where I could sit there. I could pretend to be him, But then you have his problem is the details. His problem is the detail and the politics. His problem is the politics, isn't it? Which is strange because he's a politician. But the problem is that he has these lines, like he started it off, like in that last interview, that Jack Tame one, where he says, "Oh, we're going to do 5 things," because he's learned from that mistake. He wants 5 things that he can just like bullet point off. But once you stray off that very narrow kind of that. Yes, a very narrow kind of lane he's on. Once you stray off that, my God, he just starts flailing, doesn't he? He just starts he just shits the bed. And I think maybe someone in the chat mentioned that it's very quite quaint that he's doing this very sort of forthright Christian kind of politician shtick, which is quite old-fashioned, like if you look at the American situation. Because if this was America, if this was the United States, he'd probably be better served if he just went into attack mode and said to her "No, you're a fucking liar" or something. Do you know what I mean? Like started deflecting and so in a sense, it's quite sweet that he's the stuff that's coming out of his mouth is out of the mouths of babes, or however the proverb goes. He's revealing some racist shit, but he's just regurgitating the lines that his staffers have fed him. So he's an empty suit, but he's not a slick empty suit. He's not someone who has political instincts. He's not someone who really gets what he should be talking about. He's not someone who's So when he's dishonest, he just looks dishonest, and that's quite nice. It's nice to have a shifty politician who can't lie convincingly. That's quite sweet. Sadly, people will still elect him because they don't. That politics isn't about who's right, But fuck me. He should have tipped over the desk. Oh, there was no desk there. He should have done something he should have slapped her. It's that orchestra pit theory. And this is like Roger Ailes, the guy, the chairman of Fox, or the former CEO of Fox News. He famously said that if you have 2 men on stage and one's giving a solution to the Middle Eastern problem, a detailed solution to the Middle Eastern problem, and the other falls headfirst into the orchestra pit, who do you think is going to be talked about afterwards? And that's that whole philosophy that went into Fox News and by extension American news, current affairs broadcasting. And so if you think about and that also if you think about the Academy Awards, that's what happened with Will Smith. Will Smith did almost the definition of orchestra pit theory. people aren't talking about who won the Oscars. People are talking about Will Smith slapping the guy in the face. You know, so with this interview, he should have done something. Like he should have I don't know, whipped his dick out and started masturbating. He should have done so many different things than he did. And then people would talk about something else. Then it's just his rank hypocrisy. Oh my lord. Or just like not hypocrisy, but just inadequacy. No. Well, all these words are true, but he just can't do his job.
How's Te Reo going, by the way?
I've really struggled, to be honest, just trying to find a way to do it in a way that can work for me.
So he doesn't give a fuck about Te Reo. It's a struggle. It won't be a struggle, by the way. It won't be a struggle when Duolingo brings Te Reo on board this year. So hold on for that. I think when Duolingo brings Te Reo as a course, it's going to take off really, really big time. But you're right to today. His personality is very dry and his opinions are very bad. He doesn't have that, like again, with John Key, I don't quite see it, but I understand that because people keep telling me this. But with the last guy, the last winning politician on his party, last winning leader of his party, he had a certain kind of cringe dad humor kind of charisma. And he had a certain charm about him. This guy doesn't have that. This guy is a bit charmless. Yeah, like you say, his personality is very dry. Again, it's because he's not a politician. He's just a CEO. He's there to cut costs, and he's come into it thinking, oh, I'm the best at my job. I'll do this, easy peasy. My mother told me I was always destined for greatness. Blah blah blah, and he's gone in, and he's sat down, regurgitated all these lines. He's probably goes away and thinks, wow, they really love me. That's probably what he thinks.
But I've got a tutor coming in after Easter, and we're going to spend Monday afternoon just going through it together. So I'm really hopeful and really excited about it because it's something I've wanted to do for a long time.
It is something that can be a little bit nerve-wracking.
I wish I had the opportunity to learn earlier, do you know what I mean, to be honest, because it's something I want to do, I think it's important, and I just have a great, I'm just really curious about it. I really admire people who've gone on that journey to learn it.
Are there any Māori politicians in the other parties that you kind of get on with?
Oh, that's a good question, but it's interesting. He's expressed a desire to learn Te Reo Māori, the Māori language, and what's the thing about learning Māori in this country, or learning Te Reo in this country, is that you can't learn just the language. It's not like you just can learn. What he said is he's just going to get someone in who's going to teach him how to do the language, and I think by that he means someone's going to come in and teach him how to pronounce the words properly and give the greetings properly. He doesn't mean he's going to find someone to teach him how to be fully fluent in the language. I don't think that he means that at all. But the thing about learning Te Reo Māori is that you can't just learn the language in isolation from the culture. And when he says, I'm going to get someone in, that's kind of, again, this is also why he doesn't realise what he's saying, and he's just hopelessly inadequate, is that if you're talking to the audience of this show, who are, again, it's my presumption that they're Māori or predominant Māori, what he's saying to them is that, okay, so he's going to write everything off, write all Māori aspirations off as he's done for the last 20 odd minutes, but he's going to learn the language somehow. And that just doesn't make sense, because you can't learn the language without engaging in Te Ao Māori. You've got to spend time on the marae. You've got to cultivate Māori interests and Māori friends and stuff. You can't just be like, I'll get someone in on Monday who'll teach me the language. That just doesn't make sense. So, but maybe in good faith, maybe he's on a journey where he at the end of it, he he learns he has some whakapapa and gets a full facial tattoo, and who knows? We'll see. Stranger things have happened.
All right.
I get on with a number of them. I tried to, in my old life, I know the other side of politics and all those politicians really well because I worked with everybody, obviously. And so, I admire Kelvin Davis.
Did you notice how he said the other side of politics? He calls Māori the other side. She wasn't saying, who are your favourite left-wing politicians? She said, who are your favourite Māori politicians? And that's a bit of a tell, isn't it? I just want to make sure I heard that correctly.
Māori candidates in this upcoming election. I'm thinking of 2 or 3 already that we've had conversations with. And so, the reality is, if we're going to be a national party, when you look at it, we have to be a national party. And that means talking and presenting our centre-right politics, principles and beliefs to all communities across New Zealand. And that's what I'm really committed to doing.
How's Te Reo going, by the way?
I've really struggled, to be honest, just trying to find a way to do it in a way that can work for me. But I've got a tutor coming in after Easter and we're going to spend Monday afternoon just going through it together. So I'm really hopeful and really excited about it because it's something I've wanted to do for a long time.
It is something that can be a little bit nerve-wracking.
I wish I had the opportunity to learn earlier, do you know what I mean, to be honest, because it's something I want to do. I think it's important and I just have a great, I'm just really curious about it. I really admire people who've gone on that journey to learn it.
Are there any Māori politicians in the other parties that you kind of get?
Okay, it was my mistake. She said in the other parties, so I guess I just misheard that.
On with all right?
I get on with a number of them. I tried to, my old life, I know the other side of politics and all those politicians really well because I worked with everybody, obviously. And so, I admire Kelvin Davis, I admire Willie Jackson. I found them really.
Fun fact: that second guy, Willie Jackson, I think he's the ex-husband of Moana Maniapoto, who's doing the show there. So New Zealand is a smaller place.
Good people, honourable people, they have their point of view, they throw their punches, but at a personal level I found them really good. And there's the fact, and I think that's really special about New Zealand politics, is that I lived in America for 8 years and I remember talking to President Obama about it and just sort of, when I was there.
That's a shameless name drop, isn't it? Isn't that just the worst fucking grasping, low fucking... This is just like... This is someone who has an inferiority complex. If you think you have to name drop Obama, where you're like... I lived in America and I was just talking about this with Obama, actually. Do you know, like, it's such a weasel shit. What he means was he was at a lunch, a corporate lunch or a fundraiser or something, and while he was queuing up, he had some kind of idle banter with the President of the United States. That's what it means, right? It's not like he was playing golf with him or something. Although having said that, we do. Our last prime minister, a few prime ministers ago, we did have a prime minister who was a golf buddy with Obama. But that's just so cheesy, so cringe.
60% of Americans could agree on what their country was about, and today it would be anywhere just below 30%. And that's a really sad thing because you can't zip that division back up again. And I think in New Zealand, because our politics and our politicians run into each other all the time, we're highly accessible to the public and we're highly accessible to each other.
It's quite special, isn't it?
It's really special, and we've got to keep the civility in our politics. So you and I can disagree without being disagreeable. And
he says that a few times. He says, we can disagree without being disagreeable. I think he's got like one of these calendars which have like those sort of phrases for the day, where he it's like Monday. Oh, a rising tide lifts all ships. Oh, I like that one. I'm going to say that in my next speech. And this is where he says we can disagree but not be disagreeable. Oh, that sounds like a nice platitude. It writes itself.
And also find a way to be able to maintain relationship. And I think that's the great thing about New Zealand politics, and that's what I don't want to see change. I want to be able to, as my grandmother say, disagree without being disagreeable. So.
Well, all the best as you head into the election.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on the show and engaging with me. I appreciate it.
Oh, he seems like, at the end of it, he seemed quite sweet. Like, he seemed like Like, I don't. Maybe he just doesn't even realize when he's been savaged. Maybe you can talk about him and to like in front of him. You can actually say real awful shit about him to his face, and he just doesn't even get it. Because he came off really poorly in that interview, and he's like, at the end of it, he's like, "Thank you." maybe he pays good money to be beaten or something. Wow, because that was like a, she really hung him out to dry, and not even like, and it's not even like a hard thing to do either. Like she's a great interviewer, but like she was just giving him rope and he was hanging himself. So, yeah, that's our centre right, and what's happened is that he's going up in the polls, though. That's the thing. The government is going down, and and this guy's going up. So it might actually, there might actually be more of a competition in the next year. Sadly, it'll mean that it'll be Labour trying to win back national voters. So that's kind of sucks, but we'll see what happens. I think that it's good that they're like I think because when Labour started sinking in the polls, that was when they started panicking and started rolling out policies. So actually, maybe it could be a good thing that he gets more popular, because they've rolled out like they overnight they just realised that they could halve all public transport fares in this country, and it wasn't that expensive a policy, and they just did it, and they just only did it really because National were on their toes. And like I just catch the bus now. It's just like $1. It's $1 to get on the bus, and that's something they just could have done all along, and they only did it because they felt that they had to fight. And I feel that's a good thing. Politics could be a bit more competitive now, but the reason that he's grown in popularity is because it's traditional national voters who they see a safe, corporate, boring white guy, because his job wasn't really to really be this energizing kind of figure, because he's not Jacinda Ardern, that's for sure. But his job is to basically shut the fuck up and wear a blue ribbon, attend the field days and vote for the best groomed lamb, or whatever they do on field days, agricultural field days. That's his job. And if he doesn't say some fucked up shit along the way, then they're gonna do well for themselves. And I think the problem is at the moment that they have is that he's saying some fucked up shit. People are talking to him now and asking him questions, and he's saying just great. Like in this interview, he said some extraordinarily crazy loco shit there, like about that full-blown treaty denial. He did treaty denial and he did conspiracy theories, whilst not realizing it. Like he seems like a sweet. He's like with this like face of an angel. Do you know? It didn't seem like it was a very cynical thing he was doing at all. He just kind of like said it. So ugly, such ugly politics. It's so conflicting, right? So conflicting. Anyway, I've been on the stream and I've been talking for like more than 2 hours now. So thanks for coming. If you've, I'll do something more substantive later. I'll find a better time to stream, and I'll find better sound recording, and I might even shave. So yeah, and also if Jamie J's still on, I'll talk about bicubic interpolation. Because how about noise reduction? I'll talk about noise reduction next time. That'll send you to sleep. Okay, thanks for coming here.